Friends, we are witnessing a setup in the atmosphere right now that is practically scripture perfect for a massive storm event. I want to walk you through the science of this, because when you understand the mechanics behind the map, you realize just how critical it is to get your family prepared. We have a bomb cyclone taking shape over the Great Lakes. Now, that term sounds like hype, but let me explain the physics cooking this up, because for those of us who study the skies, it is a truly awe-inspiring display of God's creation. Up in the jet stream, we are seeing separate rivers of energy, meteorologists call them shortwave troughs, merging into one. Imagine two swollen creeks slamming together during a flood. The combined force is far more destructive than either one on its own. That is exactly what is happening overhead. These energy currents are syncing up with divine timing, creating what we call a positively tilted trough that is digging deep and strengthening fast. That intensification acts like a giant vacuum cleaner in the sky. It sucks the air upward, and as that air leaves, the pressure at the surface plummets. When that pressure crashes this hard, we get bombogenesis, which technically means the pressure drops at least 24 millibars within a 24-hour window. This storm is not just going to meet that benchmark, it is going to blow right past it. By Monday morning, the models are painting a bullseye over the Great Lakes with a central pressure of 971 millibars. For context, your standard sea level pressure is about 1,013 millibars. A deficit of over 40 millibars is something you typically only see in the heart of a hurricane. Now, do not get me wrong, this is not a tropical system. The structure is totally different, but that barometer reading should tell you this is a serious beast. That pressure difference creates a gradient, and nature is always trying to balance the scales. Think of a contour map with a steep cliff. The closer those lines are, the faster the wind has to move. We are looking at contour lines packed so tight that we will see sustained winds of 30 to 40 miles per hour, with gusts screaming up to 60 or even 70 miles per hour in the worst spots. I need to explain the warm air situation, or advection, out ahead of this thing, because it is the key to the ice danger. On the south side, we are pulling deep moisture straight up from the Gulf of Mexico. That warm, wet air is riding up over the top of a dense, cold air dome sitting at the surface. We call this overrunning, and it is the classic recipe for a devastating ice storm. Up in the northeast, there is a shallow layer of freezing air hugging the ground, maybe only a few thousand feet thick. Above that, the air is warm. So, the precipitation falls as rain, but the moment it drops into that bottom freezer layer, trouble starts. Here is the kicker. That bottom layer is too shallow to turn the rain into sleet pellets. Instead, the water becomes supercooled. It stays liquid even though it is colder than 32 degrees Fahrenheit. The second that supercooled water touches a power line, a branch, or your driveway, it freezes instantly. That is freezing rain. It is a silent nightmare because it coats everything in heavy cement. While snow is fluffy and light, ice is dead weight. Just a half-inch of glaze adds hundreds of pounds of stress to the grid. That is more than enough to snap utility poles like toothpicks. Our data is signaling over half an inch of ice accumulation for the Adirondacks, central New Hampshire, and parts of Vermont and Maine. Some folks could see 3/4 of an inch. When you get that much ice, the lights are going out. It is not a matter of if, but when. And please remember, recovering from an ice storm is harder than a snowstorm. You are looking at rebuilding infrastructure, which means days or weeks without heat. Now, on the flip side, the northwest flank of the low, we have a totally different animal. The winds are cranking down from the north, dragging bitter Arctic air into the mix. When that cold collides with the moisture wrapping around the low, you get a blizzard. The upper Midwest is sitting right in the left exit region of the jet stream, which is the sweet spot for violent upward motion. You combine that lift with deep moisture and freezing temperatures, and the snow comes down heavy. But a blizzard is about more than just snow. To officially call it a blizzard, you need 3 things: winds hitting 35 miles per hour, visibility dropping below a quarter mile, and those conditions lasting for 3 straight hours. Parts of eastern Minnesota, northern Wisconsin, and especially the upper peninsula of Michigan are going to check every one of those boxes. We are talking snowfall rates of 1 to 2 inches an hour, whipped around by 40 to 50 mile per hour gales. The wind is going to take that fresh snow, plus whatever is already on the ground, and turn the world completely white. In a true whiteout, you literally cannot see the hood of your car. This is where people make tragic mistakes. Do not try to walk to the barn or the neighbor's house. You can lose your bearings in seconds. Folks have frozen to death 50 feet from their own front door because they got disoriented. The totals are going to be staggering. The UP of Michigan could see 30 inches, that is 2.5 feet of snow. Northern Wisconsin is looking at 15 to 20 inches. But this is a sharp cutoff. Drive down to Madison, and you might only see 3 inches. Minneapolis gets maybe 6 or 7. Western Michigan will see similar heavy piles. Why such a drastic difference over a short distance? It is all about where the deformation band sets up, that is the heavy pivot point north and west of the storm center. If you are under that band, you get buried. If you are 20 miles south, you get a dusting. This deformation zone creates narrow ribbons of intense snowfall. These bands might only be 20 miles wide, but they can dump inches of snow in an hour. It is like a fire hose. If it is pointed at your town, you are getting the deluge. Finally, let's look at the severe weather risk in the warm sector. Down south, ahead of the cold front, that unstable Gulf air is trying to rise. Now, the instability itself, the energy for the storm, is actually pretty modest. The Cape values, that is the fuel for thunderstorms, are hovering between 500 and 1,000 joules per kilogram. That is not usually enough to ring alarm bells on its own. But here is the problem. The wind shear is off the charts. We measure shear by the difference in wind speed and direction as you go up. We are seeing bulk shear values of 50 to 70 knots. That is incredible dynamics. Shear does two things. It tilts the storm so it does not rain on its own updraft, keeping it alive longer, and it induces rotation, which is the seed for tornadoes. So, we have high shear and low energy. That gives us low-top storms. These aren't the 50,000-foot giants you see in May. These might only top out at 25,000 feet. But do not let that fool you. These storms specialize in straight-line wind damage rather than big hail. From Sunday afternoon into the night, folks in the Ohio and Tennessee valleys need to be watching for a squall line. The leading edge of that line acts like a plow, pushing out wind gusts of 60 to 80 miles per hour. And we cannot ignore the risk of tornadoes. They will likely be the spin-up variety, short-lived, hard to warn on, and fast-moving. They might only be EF0 or EF1, but I tell you what, even a small tornado can be deadly if you are asleep or not paying attention. Stay safe, everyone. Friends, what really worries me about this setup is the timing. It's striking mostly while our families are tucked in bed. We know from the data that nighttime storms are deadlier simply because folks are asleep and miss the warnings. Since you can't see a tornado coming in the dark, please, I beg you, make sure you have multiple ways to wake up if a warning is issued. Now, let's dig into the fourth piece of this puzzle, which is the temperature crash. And from a physics perspective, this is truly something else. We are talking about the mercury plunging 20 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit in just a couple of hours as that Arctic front plows through. You are literally watching the atmosphere swap out one air mass for another with totally different personalities. You see, every air mass has a home, or what we call a source region. That warm air out ahead is coming straight up from the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean. It's tropical, hot, and full of moisture. But the air behind the front? That's coming down from northern Canada and the Arctic. It's bone-dry and brutally cold continental polar air. When these two giants collide, they don't play nice and mix. They create a battle line we call a frontal boundary. That cold air is heavier and denser, so it acts like a wedge, shoveling that warm air violently upward. That is literally why we call it a cold front. It is the leading edge of that heavy, cold air marching in. As that front sweeps through, the temperature doesn't just dip, it falls off a cliff. Take Chicago. You could be enjoying 60 degrees Sunday afternoon, and by Monday morning, you are shivering in below freezing temps. That isn't a cool down, folks. That is a crash, and it triggers a dangerous situation we call a flash freeze. A flash freeze happens when rain or standing water is on the ground, and the temperature nosedives below 32 degrees so fast that the water doesn't have time to dry. it instantly turns to ice. Roads that look wet are actually sheets of ice, and puddles become skating rinks. This creates black ice, transparent ice that lets the black asphalt show through, making it invisible and deadly for drivers. This flash freeze Monday morning is going to catch millions of our neighbors off guard across the Ohio Valley, the Great Lakes, and down into the South. The morning commute is going to be incredibly treacherous. This isn't like a slow-moving snowstorm where road crews can get ahead of it. This hits hard and fast, meaning many towns won't have time to pre-treat the roads. The salt trucks simply won't be out there yet when the roads turn to glass. Once that deep Arctic air settles in, it starts interacting with the Great Lakes, firing up the lake effect snow machine. It is one of God's most fascinating weather designs. It happens when that bitter cold air rushing down from the north moves over the relatively warm, unfrozen waters of the lakes, which are sitting in the upper 30s or low 40s Fahrenheit right now. When you drag Arctic air in the single digits over that warmer water, the temperature difference sparks intense rising motion in the atmosphere. The air acts like a sponge, soaking up heat and moisture from the lake, shooting upward to form clouds, and dumping heavy snow. That snow gets deposited on the downwind shores, which is why folks in western New York and northwestern Pennsylvania get buried, while their neighbors just a bit east might barely see a flake. The engine behind lake effect snow relies on a few key ingredients. You need a stark temperature gap between the water and air. You need a long fetch, that's the distance the wind travels over the water. The wind direction matters to see who gets hit, and the depth of that cold air layer determines how heavy the snow can get. With this system, all the stars are aligning for a major event. We have a temperature spread of over 30 degrees Fahrenheit. The fetch is incredibly long, particularly for the eastern sides of Lake Erie and Lake Ontario. The winds are steering right into the traditional snow belts, and the cold air is stacked deep enough to crank out heavy snowfall. We are looking at totals of 1 to 2 feet in the bands that stay put over the next few days. The snowfall rates could be intense, 2 to 3 inches an hour. These bands are amazingly narrow, sometimes just 10 or 20 miles wide. If one parks over your house, you are going to see historic amounts of snow. But if you drive just 20 miles down the road, you might be wondering what all the fuss is about. That is what makes forecasting lake effect snow so humbling. We know for a fact the heavy snow is coming. We know the general areas that will get hit, but trying to tell you exactly where those narrow bands will set up 12 to 24 hours out, that is incredibly tough. Those bands are guided by tiny instabilities in the atmosphere that are just too small for even our best computer models to see clearly. Looking at the history books, this storm is dragging down the coldest air we have seen all season for the eastern U.S. Highs in the upper Midwest and Great Lakes on Monday and Tuesday will barely scrape into the teens and 20s. Overnight, we are dropping into the single digits, and some of you will see temps fall below zero. When you factor in the wind chill, it's going to feel life-threateningly cold, so please look out for anyone who has to work outside. Remember, wind chill isn't just a number. It is physics. It measures how fast heat is stripped from your body. At these levels, frostbite can set in within 30 minutes. Hypothermia is a serious threat for folks stuck outside or, God forbid, seniors losing heat in their homes if the power goes out. The pattern locking in behind this storm suggests we are in for a long haul of cold weather, at least a week or 10 days. This isn't a quick hit-and-run cold snap. The jet stream is buckling in a way that traps the cold air up here in the north while keeping the warmth shoved way down south and out west. This whole setup is being driven by the polar vortex. Think of the polar vortex as a big bowl of cold air spinning over the North Pole. Usually, it's strong and keeps the cold bottled up. But when it gets wobbly or stretches out, like it is doing now, it spills that Arctic air right down into our backyards. Right now, we are seeing the vortex stretch because of a block in the atmosphere over Greenland. That block forces the jet stream to take a detour, dumping cold air straight down through North America. It's happening in Europe, too. It is all connected on a hemispheric scale. Predictability-wise, we have seen this coming for about a week. The models have been rock solid on the big picture of this cold pattern. We know it's going to be cold and active, and we know the lake effect is coming. However, trying to pin down the exact track of the next storm system after this one is still a bit of a guessing game. Historically speaking, big winter storms in the Great Lakes are part of life up here. But what makes this one stick out is the kitchen sink aspect. Heavy snow, howling winds, ice, severe thunderstorms, and a temperature crash, all packed into 48 hours. It is that combination of hazards hitting all at once that makes this a truly significant event. The years that look most like this one usually happen during a strong La Niña with an active polar vortex. In those winters, we see cold shot after cold shot, storms riding the northern track, and tons of lake-effect snow. We also usually see warmth in the southwest, which matches exactly what we have right now. If this keeps up, and the long-range data says it will, the second half of winter is going to be busy for the northern U.S. That means more storms, more deep freezes, and more snow days. It also means we need to be ready for the strain on our roads, power grids, and heating bills. For those of you who geek out on the science like I do, this is going to be a textbook event to watch. Watch for the low pressure to deepen rapidly, the massive shield of precipitation, and the dry slot on the satellite loop, that clear wedge that shows where the driest air and strongest winds are punching in. Watching those lake effect bands organize on radar once the cold air hits the water is going to be something to see. I have to give credit where it's due. The computer models nailed this one. The global models sniffed this out 5 to 7 days ago, and the deterministic runs have been very consistent on where this thing is going and how strong it will be. The ensemble models, which run a bunch of what-if scenarios, are all singing the same tune. That gives us a lot of confidence in this forecast, even if the fine details shift a little bit. Bottom line, friends, this is a major event that is going to disrupt life for millions. Travel will be a mess, power could go out for hundreds of thousands, and businesses will close. Please check on your neighbors, stay safe, and respect the weather. It weighs heavy on my heart to talk about this, but we are looking at real dangers here, from folks sliding off icy highways to life-threatening cold exposure, and even the silent tragedy of carbon monoxide poisoning when people are just trying to keep their families warm. To be able to see this coming days in advance is a true blessing. And it comes with a responsibility. We have the tools to know what is on the horizon. Now, wisdom dictates that we prepare our homes, and compassion calls on us to look out for our neighbors who might be struggling. Digging into the mechanics of this storm system doesn't make it any less frightening. If anything, understanding the thermodynamics just shows you the sheer power nature is unleashing. This isn't just media noise. Folks, this is the reality of physics at work. And the data is speaking loud and clear. We are staring down the barrel of a serious and hazardous winter event. Keep your eyes on the forecast and your guard up. The atmosphere follows the laws of physics without mercy. But the good Lord gave us the intelligence to track these storms. So let us use that gift to ensure our families and communities come through this safely. The forecast models are painting a stark picture, and the atmospheric ingredients are coming together exactly like the textbooks say. We are well past the point of guessing this is a high-confidence signal for a major storm, so please, take these warnings to heart.